Hey y'all, I'm back. Round two. So I'm going to make sure that I'm able to be heard before I super go into it. So welcome for folks joining in. I'm going to give it a couple of moments to warm up, make sure my volume is on so we can get started. So today we're talking about crossing thresholds. And doing so to crossing thresholds that maybe normally we can't see. So for anybody who's coming in, if you could just give me some interaction to let me know that you can hear me. I had issues on the last stream. So if you just like do a hey or a okay, I saw a like. That's good because I feel like if you couldn't hear me, maybe you wouldn't like it. I don't know. I'm just I just need some comments to let me know that hi Radiant Realm 91. Can you hear me? Can you let me know? I think you can, but I just had a weird issue with sound. So you can hear me? Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. All right, let's jump in. Let's dive in. Whenever I get cut off with sound and stuff, that means something good's coming. So now I'm getting even more excited. Okay. We're talking about a very nebulous, slippery topic. Okay, imagine trying to catch a fish in your hand, right? And the fish would be like going everywhere. It's like that. Okay, even me preparing for this live was like that. It took me forever to create that thumbnail that you see in the description because I was working on creating this concept around crossing a boundary into an underwater threshold and the nuance to even say what it is I was seeking and to have the algorithm frequentially match me at that was like trying to hold a fish down. Okay. That's the frequency we're in right now. All right. When we go into and cross underwater thresholds, things that really you're not supposed to know about unless you've gone through all of the initiations and whatnot. There are some, you have to be really precise about things, okay? And the way to do that is through learning about the art of passing, okay? There is an interesting frequency of the gatekeeper being neither this nor that. And we're going to look at some of the media examples in society to support us with cultivating our archetype of the art of passing and how that can look like, okay? So, yeah, I'm just really excited about this topic because it's actually really helping me to heal a particular wound that I had been holding on to for a few years. I'm going to share a little story. By the way, this is all for entertainment purposes only. Also, before I share my story, because I'm about to resonate with y'all. I need to make sure I'm in a safe space, not even safe, comfortable, welcoming. So if I could get some likes, some, hey, I'm from so and so, like something to just like, let's cultivate the space together. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to go into a story. Okay. It's a little bit personal. Okay. We're talking about gender, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about identity, we're talking about friend groups, we're talking about initiation. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. All right, I'm about to share that with y'all. So I need let me just see what's going on with y'all. Hold up. Okay, my audio's just fine. Hi, Not good to see you. Okay, let's get it. Come on, y'all. We got 11 people on here, 2 likes. I don't need a like, but I need a something. You know what I'm saying? Like a something. Samara from Florida. Oh, Florida. Yes. Holding down the coast. Holding down the coast with the most in Florida. Okay. Those are some big crocodiles and, energies out there. Thank you for blessing us with so many lives lately. You're welcome. Okay. These lives help me. Okay. A lot of times there's certain energies that are coming into channel and they prefer lives, That's why you see some people, they do lives more. It depends. I'm not going to say I'm always going to do lives, but I have been seeing the art and the alchemy of recording live, raw, and the way it frequentially changes everything when you do that. So I'm exploring it. I'm not like putting a whole standard. I know some people, they be doing it like every day and stuff. I don't know if I'll ever be like that, but I've been noticing the healing balm that I've been seeing in my world, and it's been spreading out into my work. So, yeah. All right, let's get one more comment or like, and we'll get started. Something to just get the, I just want to see where y'all are from. A lot of times, too, when you tell me where you're from, it tells me about like different ley lines that I'm activating and stuff like that. It changes depending upon different timelines I'm alchemizing. So, yeah. All right. You've been wearing more blue and it's pretty cool. The 12th house is popping off. Yes, it is popping off. Okay. Matter of fact, it's more than popping off. It's like my 12th house, what I did is I lined up, I learned all the dimensions of it. I'm world building right now, by the way. I learned all the dimensions of my 12th house. Okay, realized that the structure could not hold, that I would need to do a demo and literally blow up the foundation because there's something else under there. That's the cult of Mithras. That's what we're discussing. Okay. So yeah, the 12th house is popping off. So a lot of the information that I've been channeling lately kind of like popped off after like really going through the beyond the birth chart journey, pushing myself to write the book, to decode my birth chart, to deprogram my birth chart, to work with others to do that, and then to talk about each of the houses. It opened up a portal of the times before the reset, and how particular information was disseminated and the way the stars were interpreted. I learned that there were a lot of overlays that I kind of needed to blow up as it related to Western astrology or even Vedic, and I needed to go deeper. So I'm really excited for that experience. Thank you for witnessing. But then it opened up a whole other portal related to what it means to go beyond the birth chart, which I'll be explaining. I mean, it's a lot of downloads I'm getting, and I'm still processing through it. But a big thing is around how we're working with the frequency of water and the frequency of Neptune in particular. Neptune is really big on this conversation because Neptune is a relatively new planet. It's not one of the classicals, that they talk about. And I've been taught to learn about the reboot, the way planets are discussed now. But I've also been taught to learn about the older ways planets were discussed with more of those 7 planets. Okay, so I've been oscillating between those two. But Neptune is a very interesting frequency. Definitely has a Poseidon sort of energy, a lot of hidden secrets. It is the planet that holds Mithras, what we're going to talk about today, the cult of Mithras. This is a cult based upon the Roman mythology. And the cult of Mithras had a lot to do with art. It had a lot to do with male owners, but male only fraternities or male only orders. The cult of Mithras, they did a lot around sacrificing the bull specifically, which I find really interesting, because if you go back to the ancient times prior to Rome, you're going to see the bull and the cow looked at as being more sacred. So something happened. There were many different resets. So I've been taught to look at astrology before the reset in Babylon. So look at that particular astrology, and we're going to get into that today. But then I've also been taught to look at kind of the reset that happened around Rome as well. And it brings us to the cult of Mithras. So I was doing research on this topic. I've been working through the energies of the cult of Mithras for a while now. And one thing that I wanted to know is, are there any remnants of this particular cult in today's culture? And, AI said no. But if you look at some of the practices of the cult of Mithras, maybe that's not necessarily the case. Some interesting thing about the things about the cult of Mithras is they did a lot of their initiations in caves right off of the waters, okay? And very male only, to the point where they set themselves apart from the feminine, okay? And so typically in society, we would want to look at that as being patriarchy. Okay. But let's look at this more from the perspective of power and secrets today, instead of just patriarchy, because sometimes when we focus just on patriarchy, it takes us away from it, that title, okay, that ism takes us away from a whole other piece of knowledge that we could be possibly integrating. Okay. So let me start with the story. All right. So I've shared some of this story on Patreon. I got into what I'm doing now through a complete spiritual awakening, like lightning bolt struck, got all these downloads about the past and the future simultaneously, earth shattering, like a whole bunch of stuff. It was like I can't ignore this. It wasn't just like, oh, I had this interesting spiritual experience and now I'm going to change. Like, it was literally, the download was so strong. It was like literally every way you're living now needs to shift. And it was scary, you know? I got this download around the time, like I was at Mardi Gras, because I've been to New Orleans before, but never had been to Mardi Gras. And I was at Mardi Gras 2020, February 2020. Okay. Right before then. So there was like a weird ancestral ritual that I was moving through that I didn't fully understand. I was already becoming more attuned and aware of things, but something that I did around this time opened up a portal for me. So I used to be the co-founder of an organization in Oakland called Black Healers Connect. We started right before COVID, and the idea was to, you know, Oakland tends to be known to have like a lot of crime and that kind of stuff, trauma, not a lot of access to grocery stores and whatnot. So the idea was, what about we bring more things like sound healing and yoga to the quote unquote, and I put this in quotation marks, I don't even believe in black and white like that, but to the Black community, you know? So we did this event called Rest as Ritual on February 22nd, 2020. And we brought a bunch of folks together who had never experienced sound healing before. Sound healing was completely new in that particular demographic. That was a new thing. You know, COVID and stuff brought on more of that wellness stuff, but around this time it was still like very novel. And the idea was rest. The idea was we're moving too fast. We can't even sit to hear ourselves think. I was so busy. I literally sought out a rest retreat, a retreat that was silent. And I was so happy to go because I was so overextending myself, giving to others and all that sort of stuff, to the point where I just needed a place to be silent. So I went to this silent retreat, which changed things. And literally I needed to go to a public place to rest because the particular lifestyle I had cultivated for myself was so not supportive to rest. I literally need to go to another space to rest, you know? So anyways, that started this event called Rest as Ritual. We created it for the community. It was wildly successful. Right after I don't know even why I made the arrangements the way I did. So I was in Oakland. I created this and it was around ancestral healing. Created this ancestral healing event, Rest as Ritual. Literally got on a plane right after that, flew to New Orleans, knew I needed to go to New Orleans for some reason, just knew I needed to make it happen. So I did that. Did Mardi Gras. I thought it was going to be like, hey, party, whoop, whoop, whoop. But I felt the energies. I think it was because I was already awakening to certain energies within me. That ritual of Mardi Gras is extremely potent, okay? And then you have it on sacred land of New Orleans, okay? And then you have that Mississippi River. So I was tapping into a lot of those frequencies, and it was a little scary, okay? Because I saw the world from a completely different angle. And the weirdest thing happened during that time. I had went on that trip with a bunch of friends, okay? A little about me, a personal tidbit about me is I was very much of an LGBT advocate, okay? And this brings me to a question that was asked in one of my lives this year. It was when I was doing a live on the 6th house, and I called it The Crossing. And in this live, I was asked the question in the comments. And, you know, I always like to look out for questions or certain things that are flagged in the comments because sometimes it's a code. And when I put that live together called The Crossing, somebody asked, do I support LGBT? And in that live, I had my little top hat on, okay, because I was getting into that crossroads sort of energy and stuff like that. I was getting into this Marduk sort of energy as well. And I got asked the question, do you support LGBTQ? And what I said was, I don't support acronyms, which I don't. I don't support acronyms, all right? There was a time in my life where I did. I was social justice warrior, this, that, and the third. I mean, to the point where, you know, I was working in spaces where I was hosting we were doing summer camps for African American youth. I put that in quotation marks, African American youth. And there was issues with the leadership around LGBTQ and, you know, whether or not they wanted to accept that. And I was like that writer that was like, hey, what are you talking about? We're not going to be archaic here. We're not going to be so conforming to very binary roles. Like, we're going to open the space, you know? So I was that advocate. Same thing in when I taught at in college. Like, I brought in I did a family systems class, and I brought in very specific literature around somebody's struggle, or not struggle, but life's journey with transitioning from male to female. Okay. And all of the things that included. All right. I also had a lot of friends who were gay men. Okay. And that was just a part of my life, you know. Something changed though. Something around 2020 changed some things. I went to Mardi Gras with this same group of people that were like family. This was like my family, okay? But when I had that weird experience where it felt like I was crossing a weird threshold or gateway into another way of knowing, I had a very strange spiritual attack from that same group. Source, not from everybody, but there was a particular energy of spiritual attack that was sourced from somebody I saw as a family member, like a really close friend was in my wedding, that sort of thing. And it was almost like we were existing in two worlds at the same time. And the message I got from this person through this really bizarre experience is like, you better not cross this threshold. You better not cross this bound. It was so weird because I didn't know about any of this stuff. I just saw spirituality as like meditation and doing yoga. I didn't know about other realms like that. And so it freaked me out, you know, and I knew this friend that was, you know, I saw them as a very close friend, that sort of thing. I realized that, and I always knew they had a certain power. They had a certain power to them. That was something we always knew and all that. I used to go to them for spiritual advice and stuff. But I saw it a little bit more profoundly. And it was really clear that like, hey, you're not supposed to have access to this. This is not for you, okay? And so this person showed up as a gatekeeper for me during this time. So it was really weird. And I cut myself off from that group. It was really clear to me that something about the dynamics with that particular friend group, I was not fully understanding, and it was leaving me at a deficit. So I had to exit that friend group relationship. And maybe somebody out here can relate to that. So I had a wound from that though, you know, and I went through a polarity integration where I was so open. Okay. I was so, like, of course, free love, of course, you know, marry whoever you want, who cares? Right. But then I had to go to the other side of the polarity of like, well, what's behind that? You know, like what's behind, what's the spiritual dynamics of LGBT? What are the things I'm missing here? There's something there was a huge glaring bit of information that I missed, and I needed to catch up. Okay. So that's kind of why this particular recording is coming today. When I was talking about crossing a threshold through the sixth house, I got the message in my messages that said, do you support LGBT? And I said, no, I do not support acronyms, but I support freedom. Meaning whatever you want to do, you know, however you want to live your life, you should be free to do that. As long as you're not forcing or imposing certain restrictions on others through that process, like I'm cool with it, but I'm not going to support an acronym. Okay. So I still stand by that. But I think it's important to give a more holistic view of how I got to that. And there is another side to me of, yeah, went to the pride parades, taught about these energies, put myself out there in front of like other straight groups, you know, who were trying to bash it and say it was wrong and evil. I was on that other side. Okay. Then I had to get to neutral though, because I wasn't fully understanding the dynamics. And there's some extreme wizardry that we need to understand. Okay. First of all, I spent a lot of time studying the art of passing. Okay. I was fascinated by it, and I realized it was because there was going to be a moment where I would need to pass. Okay. So let's just talk about for a second, and this isn't an experience that I directly know. So let me be clear about that. That being said, I've done a lot of study and thought about it and had friends and all that sort of stuff related to this topic. But I do want to say I don't have a direct knowing about this, but I've been around this energy a lot. Okay, so let me just be really clear about that. Somebody who grows up in a dynamic of binary code, you can either be this or that, and you must choose. And that person incarnates on this planet and doesn't, they create another way. That is magic. They have taken a magical path. Okay? So off the gate, people who can pass in binary coded society are skilled magicians. This is step one. This is what you need to know about. And this isn't just LGBT, because I feel like we get too caught up in the acronyms. I'm talking about a way of knowing and a way of life. Somebody who chooses another option consciously and path works that option for themselves is working magic. They are a magical thinker. They live a magical way. You need to learn from this energy. So what I'm seeing a lot right now is a lot of feminines sometimes have felt oppressed or humbled or disrespected by gay men specifically. You're holding on to a hurt that far transcends anything related to LGBTQ. It has nothing to do with that, actually. Okay? What you start knowing when you pass through other realms is you must neither be this nor that. You can't choose a side. You need to be all things to pass. Okay? This is why a lot of the gatekeeping deities are neither this nor that. They're not male nor female. Okay? So somebody who is living that way in the third dimensional paradigm is a wizard. Straight up, you have to be. There's always a choice that you need to make, a binary coded choice that you need to make. But there's a group of people on this planet who are consciously path working a third way. They are living within a miracle frequency. There is more power that is generated through doing that. There are more possibilities that are created through doing that. They are working magic, and specifically boundary magic, which is one of the most powerful forms of magic. Boundaries and thresholds. Okay? This is also why, a lot of feminines have felt tossed aside, I guess, by the masculine, because they see how there's a lot of, I'm just going to be honest, there's a lot of men out there that like to have sex with other men. So there's a hurt that a lot of feminines hold related to that, because it's like, well, am I not good enough, or this or that, or, why can't you just be attracted to a feminine? Well, have you ever thought about the idea that, number one, maybe there are folks out there that see sex outside of procreation, and people who see sex outside of procreation may have other sorts of information about the way energy works. Okay, you notice how priests never can get married or have children. Is that just to restrict them and to just have rules for them to follow arbitrarily? Or is there a deeper initiated form of knowledge and wisdom around what happens to consciousness through the process of sex and procreation and building lineage? It's just something to think about. Okay. People who don't choose gay or straight, you know, they choose, maybe they're non-binary or bisexual, these sorts of things. They are showing that there are more capacities, more potentialities to express energy. Okay. People who choose this as a way of life, and let me not say choose because I know that can be triggering. Let's just say people who live for this way of life. It's not about choice. Some people say it's a choice. Some people it's not. It depends. It's everybody's story is different. But people who consciously pathwork a way of life where they don't choose binary code are living in a magical way. Well, let's see. Where do we see a lot of, what do they call queer? I'm going to use queer today. Where do we see queer people? The arts, theater, magic, makeup. Okay, you're going to find queer people here. People who did not choose a binary code. I'm going to bring in another frequency into here. I used to love watching RuPaul's Drag Race. I know it's been on for a while, you know. I think I stopped at like season 3 or 4, so it's been a minute. But I have mad respect for RuPaul. But I was looking even at RuPaul's Drag Race. You see how, why did they call it Drag Race? Like, you see how they have that, if you look at the posters, you see that black and white flag. You know, the wave a black and white flag at a boundary before the drag race begins, black and white. You're passing that binary, that boundary line. They know what they were doing. There's a magical priesthood in the queer community. This is not negative nor positive. It's just something to know. There's a magical way of living that I personally think more people need to be hip to and learn from, because there's a lot, especially around boundaries, and boundaries governs the simulation. If you can master the art of boundaries and the creation of them and adhering to them in a way where you keep your originality, you are living in a magical way. Okay, you're living in a magical way. So this is just, so there's a wealth of information there. Okay, so sometimes we have feminines right now that are bashing the masculine for degrading the feminine and then choosing to have sex with themselves, you know, okay, and have this like old boys club or whatever. But maybe they are knowing about a particular frequency and the way energy moves on this planet that we don't know about, that we need to rediscover or relearn. Okay. Also, just because you're not having sex with women, that doesn't mean that you can't be in women's energy, right? There are other ways to connect with a woman outside of having sex or procreating. You could never have sex with a woman, but be extremely close and they are foundational to your life. Okay. And you thrive off of that life force. That's a possibility as well. It's not all sex. Okay. That being said, there's a queerness when you get to the boundary line. There's a queerness that happens. You can be neither this nor that. You need to be a little strange. You know, you just have to be a little different. You can't be so defined by the boundaries. People who master this can go in between worlds with ease. They've been engaging in a magical way in all realms and dimensions. So of course they're going to be able to cross the boundaries and the thresholds a lot easier. Okay. They speak different languages. Okay. They know different boundaries. So that's one thing. That's one secret to really think about. Okay. This is all coming from a large initiation that I've been doing with the frequency of Marduk, who is a Babylonian or pre-Babylonian deity, which has 50 names from the time of Sumeria. You can find Marduk in all major religions. You can find Marduk in the Antichrist. You can find Marduk in Sky Daddy. You can find Marduk in many, many different emanations. So I have been, I just recently published a book called The 50 Names of Marduk. I'll be sharing more stuff related to this. But all of this has been coming from stepping into the mysteries of Marduk, which is connected to the priesthood. Many times you cannot access this information, or so they say, unless you are a man. You got to be a brother. You got to be a son. You got to be a son of somebody or a brother of somebody. Okay, you got to be an L. All right. You got to be a ruler, okay? You got to, and a lot of the times this is caught up in patriarchy. So you need to learn how to pass, and you need to become fish. You know, that's something else that's talked about a lot of times, specifically in trans, is this idea of becoming fish. And I need to really, really articulate the importance of working boundaries is, and how powerful the magic of boundaries is. This is Saturnian magic. That's the strongest magic, Saturn. To work the boundaries, you work with Saturn. So in for like transgender, there's actually like a really good movie. It's called Paris is Burning. It came out like I think in the 80s or early 90s. So good. It's a really good documentary on the ballroom scene, the creation of it, all that stuff. Okay. But anyway, there's this idea. Oh, and another good book to read to kind of get this experience, because it helps if you're switching archetypes. If you can study the way transition happens in transgender community or through drag, like preparing for drag, you'll learn a lot about boundaries. Okay. You know, Marduk, we think about Marduk as being this really serious deity. So either like super evil or just like super powerful, because Marduk is about power. Okay. But there's a joker aspect to Marduk. There's a clown jester aspect to Marduk that governs things. And that is that sometimes power is about illusion. Power is about the ability to create what the rules are. But in order to do that, you need to have space for play, for creativity, for imagination. This is when you get into the realm of the mime. Study miming, okay? There's a reason why people in 3D hate mimes and clowns too, because it makes people in the third dimension reality feel a little uncomfortable, you know, because yeah, it's showing you, you know, clowns and jesters, they're also going to be at some of these boundary lines and gateways, because they're also showing you certain polarity that you haven't integrated yet. If you're too negatively opposed to something, you will not be granted access, okay? Because you're oscillating too much out of neutrality. This is the lesson of Marduk, staying in that gray areas, knowing the black, knowing the white, and knowing how to balance it, juggle it, move through it. This is a magical initiation that somebody who is transitioning through a process of gender, transitioning their physical gender, they're getting this initiation from day one, okay? And they're learning about this idea of passing boundaries and becoming fish. Why fish? What's that about? Well, we get into the frequencies of Isis, you know. There is this energy of the woman, the mother coming from the waters. And you can see this also in Isis. It's also in Marduk as well. Okay, you see that Jesus has that fish symbolism. Jesus is a very, very recent reboot of an emanation of Marduk. Okay. But there's an interesting way of knowing in the transgender community where they need to transition to become fish. But we all, at some point, may need to transition to become fish. There's a priesthood in the queer community. Okay? There is an interesting access to divinity in the queer community. And if you're too caught up in any sort of prejudices or hurts or power indifferences or dynamics that you feel like you're being oppressed in certain ways, you will miss it. You will miss this very critical lesson around Saturnian boundaries and crossroads. This is why the crossroads deities are neither male nor female. They have both emanations of genders. It's because they're more balanced within themselves. Okay. And I knew this earlier on, you know, spending a lot of time specifically hanging out with gay men. Like I'm like, these men are more in tune than like straight men. They had more, I could tell they have more like emotional intelligence, smarter. They tended to be smarter. You know, I always just kind of noticed that. But there's another frequency to that. And, you know, there's a priesthood frequency as well. You know, priests, they didn't get married. Priests didn't have children. So it makes sense. A lot of beings who come from priestly classes might incarnate as LGBTQ. That might be the best place for them in society, giving them the most movement. And so they can become fish. Okay? So any sort of issues that you have, any tensions that you have with the LGBTQ community, and I'm specifically talking to the feminine right now, because I've been seeing this and intuiting this a lot in the feminine. Learn. Okay? You're too polarized against it. You're not getting the medicine, because at some point you also will need to become fish. You also will need to become fish and pass. What are you learning? What are you learning from the priesthood? What lessons from the priesthood are triggering you right now that you could be integrating to improve your craft? Because one thing I can say, specifically as it relates to homosexual males, and the process of them becoming fish, that is a priestly rite that they are going through. You might want to take notes. You might want to take notes, okay, instead of being salty about it, because you want to become fish too. So I'm going to stop that there. Let's see. What do we got going on? What do we got going on? Freedom and truth, Radiant Realm says. Not a Bot says, I remember the Cosmic Empress when I was on the New Age spirituality spoke that the LGBT movement was Hadarian from Hadar. Ooh, I got to look into that. That Hadar thing has come up in another place, so I need to look at that. Many call women fish. Exactly. And that gets into, so Radiant Realms, that gets into another crossroads deity to look into that's found at the bottom of the ocean by the name of Olokun. Olokun is the keeper of wealth and treasures at the bottom of the ocean. Some people say that Olokun is chained. Okay. And then also some people say Olokun is male or female or both, very androgynous. And another thing about Olokun, which is interesting, is that Olokun represents the colors of the rainbow. So what this is meaning is somewhere down below, deep at the bottom of the sea, there is a reservoir of wealth and a deity. You know, also if you look at the etymology of the word Olokun, part of that word is ruler. So archon. Archon means ruler. So you could say deity, you could say archon, deep at the bottom of the sea, that is holding the frequency of wealth. Okay, and those who are a frequential match to make it down there to meet Olokun might have a certain access pass to certain aspects of wealth. And this would be wealth that transcends the monetary system that we're used to. You know, there are other ways of sharing abundance in the galaxy. Okay, so there are other forms of wealth. Okay, wealth manifests in different ways. So Olokun is neither male nor female, is a ruler at the bottom of the sea, holding on to the frequencies of wealth and treasure. But you can't be male nor female to reach the frequency. And Olokun has all the colors of the rainbow. Are you seeing a connection here? Is it just me? Here's another interesting thing about Olokun and the cult of Mithras, because we're talking about the cult of Mithras right now. You also have the Statue of Liberty, and there is some interesting symbolism related to the Statue of Liberty and the cult of Mithras. Okay, even Mithras themselves, they have like an interesting little sun halo or sun disk on them, very similar to the Statue of Liberty. But here's the thing about the Statue of Liberty. you look at it from one angle, it looks feminine. But then you look at it from another angle, and don't it look like a man with a wig? The art of passing and becoming fish, am I right? And here's another interesting thing about the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty has shackles on her, yo. The Statue of Liberty, if you look real close, go look at a picture of the Statue of Liberty. If you look real close, there's a shackle on the Statue of Liberty. What's that about? I thought this was freedom. Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. You know, I've been looking into the frequencies of the Atlantic Ocean too. Been getting really interested in that. Olokun's there. Looked into some of those yacht parties. Olokun is there. What is this ruler at the bottom of the sea, and what kind of frequential match do you need to be at? And you know, we got to look at, you know, when you're initiating into the frequencies of Marduk, there are the many ways that power is used and abused and embodied. Okay, so you get at a lot of cringy topics that we don't really want to talk about or hear about, but literally they're ruling the way our economic system and the way energy is being exchanged in our environment. So at some point, it becomes beneficial to talk about it. So, you know, the big cringy thing related to the priesthood and with these yacht parties are children. Why children? Well, what's going on with the kid? Like, why not adults? What's up with the children? Let's talk about it. Well, first of all, you have the midbrain. I mean, the child has that miraculous frequency of the imagination. It's called the midbrain. So they've done a lot of studies on the midbrain because, you know, our brain was split. You know, we have the left side, the right side, you know, those different hemispheres. But there's this part of the brain called the midbrain, which you're going to be utilizing a lot to activate your imagination. And that is studied and known to be very strong within children. Okay, this is this idea of imagination. And then like as time goes on, you get caught up in the binary code of things, this or that. Okay, but if you can cultivate that midbrain, that's where a huge treasure trove is. I was watching this show on Netflix called Travelers, and it was about these interesting time travelers outside of the galaxy that would keep tabs on Earth. And one thing that they constantly did was they utilized children to give messages. And they would basically infiltrate the body of a child to deliver a message. And in the show, they said, well, it's just children's minds have the best. Like if we were to try to do this to an adult, it would shatter them. It would like kill them. Okay. But because they have like more of an imagination, like they haven't been, you know, harvested through the binary code as much. There's more of like a fertile energy with children. Okay. So they were showing that in that show. And so, you know, I've been having to wear the shoes of the priesthood more, you know, with this Marduk frequency that I'm tapping into. So it's less about me seeing myself as separate from them. It's more about me understanding their motivations, okay? Learning about maybe things I just didn't know. Sometimes you need to step into someone's shoes to learn about the motivations. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I am saying that the priesthood knows that sex is more than procreation. It's not creating sexual trauma for the sake of creating sexual trauma. What it is it's creating a force field of energy, which can be manipulated and directed to fulfill certain goals. And it's extracting that energy and that force field. And the way that humans have been engineered, a lot of times the easiest way to do that is through sex. Okay, it's through sexual exploitation. But they realize that there's something more to sexual energy than procreation. Otherwise, they would utilize sex to procreate. But these initiated people are not doing that. They want the masses to do it, but they are set apart. They don't have sex the way the masses do. They don't see sex the way the masses do. They're utilizing sexual energy in other ways outside of procreation. They might be speaking to, through their actions, they might be speaking to a time prior to genetic engineering with the splitting of the sexes and how energy was shaped and directed prior to then. Maybe all of those secret books and secret transcriptions and ways of knowing expressed this, okay? Which is why they either choose to have sex with people who literally cannot get pregnant, or they choose to exploit the sexual energy of children who also cannot get pregnant. You see what I'm saying? And then you get into this energy of the biology, how the midbrain, something starts happening to the midbrain as you get older. So that fertile ground of imagination is no longer as ripe as it used to be. So there's also that element as well. Okay, so maybe this isn't about the exploitation of bodies as much as it's about the exploitation of something else and the continuation of a certain type of legacy. And something about procreating with the opposite sex would take away from that. Okay, these are the frequencies of Marduk. It ain't always pretty, but it's necessary. 50 Shades of Marduk, now on Amazon. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit out of my book Beyond the Birth Chart, because this is all the cult of Mithras too. I mentioned the priests of in this book, which is more around the times of Sumeria, but it's a similar frequency. So I'm on page 11. It says, the priesthoods of art and hidden architecture. Across history, the true keepers of power have rarely looked like kings or generals. They have worn robes, not crowns. They have spoken hymns, not edicts. They have stood in temples, monasteries, observatories, not on battlefields. We call them priests, sages, mystics, astrologers, but beneath those titles runs a single thread. They were artists. So in a lot of these cults, y'all, a lot of these secret orders where only men are allowed and all this stuff, they do art, like a lot. Art, theater, because they are initiated into a particular faculty of Marduk, which lets us know that things aren't as serious or they're not as black and white as we think they are. There's actually a lot of not even gray area, but there's a hidden spectrum of color to access. So this brings me into the frequencies of the Wizard of Oz. You know how like in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, she starts off in that black and white world, right? And, you know, things are a little bit more oppressive. You know, she has, you know, she has her aunt's like foot on her neck. Like it just feels really oppressive and drab. And then she enters a portal through the tornado. And she ends up in this world of color, okay? She crosses a dimensional frequency bandwidth, and now she's in a realm of color. These are a part of the mysteries of the priesthood. Okay, what changes from only having access to black and white to having a realm of color? There is a gate that must be crossed, and there are certain permissions that must be met. And really what that means is the art of passing, the art of becoming fish. So once again, let's think about drag culture, ball scene, okay? Look, the nuance is extreme, all right? Because, you know, the art of passing, and a lot of times, like if you're transgender, that's like a life or death sort of thing. You being able to pass just to go to the grocery store, you need to have if you don't want to be, quote, called out or whatever, you need to have all nuances on check. Boundaries needs to be in order. Saturn needs to be in order. People who live this way are magical. They have to be. They have to be, you know? And so there is a huge alchemy. There is a huge lesson to learn related to this. And there is a priesthood as well. Okay, there might be certain energies where you might find yourself, if you remember a time of being fish, if you're a feminine and you remember a time of being fish, okay, you might have instances in your 3D reality where you could have tension with gay men. because it's speaking to a priesthood energy that has not been alchemized yet. And there are some gay men that carry the frequency of the priesthood. When you look at the LGBTQ, I'm putting that in quotation marks, when you look at the LGBTQ lifestyle in general, it's very priestly. Okay, it is a priestly sort of lifestyle. All right. And also it can be depending, I mean, it changes if you are a lesbian. If you're a lesbian couple, your income goes way down. But if you're a male and you hook up with another man, money's up. And you can connect with women in many, many, many other ways. Okay, you can connect with that freak, especially if you have that priestly energy. You can get right up in there. Do some hair maybe. Do some makeup. I don't know. I'm just saying. And you also have a lot of LGBTQ men of a priestly frequency that have become the gatekeepers of a woman's appearance. You have a lot of frequencies related to gatekeeping around, okay, does she look fish? All of a sudden it stops being about, do I look fish, right? And then it's like, well, actually, do you look as womanly as you can? So there could be some frequencies of that might need to be alchemized as well. But it's not about gay, straight, bi. It's about the priesthood. It is a priesthood sort of energy that you're moving through with this. Highly initiated. Okay, people who choose or who live, I won't say choose, people who live a non-binary lifestyle in a binary world must be magical. So you need to be magical too. You need to learn whatever they've been teaching or learning, you need to learn that too. Because there might be an inverse where you need to prove. Maybe you're not even becoming fish. Maybe you're becoming Marduk, or you're becoming more masculine, or you're becoming that gatekeeper. You need to be fish. So learn from the community. There's a lot of priestly initiations. That's why art is a lot of times a safe space for queer people. Even if you look into some of these like secret society things, like even Bohemian Grove, that's a cult of Mithras right there. They don't call it that anymore, but it's a all male fraternal order. They didn't do caves. They did more of the redwoods and stuff, more of a druidic frequency. But, you know, it was surrounded by art. All they did all day was art. That's what they do. They just do art. They do plays. These rich and powerful men from all over the world, they get together and they act. The cult of Mithras, the art of passing, the art of becoming fish. So a couple of movies, or one movie that I recommend, I'll say it again, Paris is Burning. That's a great movie. It really shows this concept of what do you need to do to pass? And what are the stakes? What stakes are at risk when you don't pass? Okay. You can find that a lot in the queer community. All right. They live it daily. And there's a art, and there's a very particular boundary magic related to that to learn, okay? And then I think the book that I want to recommend, it's a memoir by Janet Mock. It's called Redefining Realness, okay? And it's this concept of being real. How does she become a real girl, quote unquote, okay? And what does that mean? What does realness mean? So these are extreme magical practices in boundaries. And a lot of times you find this within the initiations and the 50 names of Marduk. This is a different degrees of power, okay? And making sure that we get out of the polarity consciousness of gender, class, race, sexual preference. All of that is critical to pass through these boundaries of becoming neutral, okay? And, you know, because sometimes... And I speak from experience because I had to alchemize a particular wound. But that keeps you away. When you hold that wound and you try to pass a boundary with that wound still in check, that wound is running the show of how you perceive what's on the other side. So the more you can alchemize and become neutral with things, okay? And instead of judging people for how they live, if it looks different from you, try their shoes on instead. What's their world like? Okay, learn about it, because there's probably more likely than not the reason why you have a negative sort of perception related to it is because something within you hasn't been alchemized, or there's a particular archetype that is seeking to be integrated through you. And that, you know, that archetype is being mirrored back to you. That being said, the queer world is a magical world. Okay. It is a magical world, and it's a lot about boundaries, crossing, passing, becoming fish. Every detail, every nuance is critical. Okay. This is the realm of the priesthood. Okay. A lot of thought went into it. A lot of ritual went into it. A lot of spectacle went into it. Because like when you look at the Vatican, don't that kind of look like a big old drag ball going on? Right? Come on. All that stuff, all that opulence, you know, and they're all fish over there. They fish. They're not really fish, but somehow they became fish. So you see how we might need to wear the shoes to do the reversal, the swap. You see that? But you would need to not be caught up in whatever wounds you have, whatever gripes you have related to the priesthood or the patriarchy or what have you. You would need to neutralize that so you could become fish. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to share is related, and I'm still connecting the dots exactly how it's related. And then I'm gonna look at the comments and questions. So ask me questions and comments, and I will definitely get to them. So I mentioned earlier in this chat that, you know, once I did the whole beyond the birth chart sort of thing, more information became revealed to me around how astrology was pre-Babylon. And I always knew this, but I was taught, I had to do some major alchemy to even get to this information, to be honest. But Libra, the scales of Libra is the newest constellation. It was invented around the times of Babylon. And Libra, if you notice in zodiac, Libra they're the scales. It's the scales. It's the balance of things. It's Ma'at. It's a symbol of cosmic order, the scales. But it's really interesting because all the other zodiac signs are like animals or people. What's up with these scales? The newest edition is a measuring instrument. What's up with that? It's interesting. What was it before? What was going on before the scales? The claws of the scorpion. The scales were the claws of the scorpion. But the scales were overlaid. So it's like you got these like scorpion claws going on, underworld energies of the balanced Libra. But like that's the overlay. The balance, the justice is the overlay. Underneath, it is a predatory, kill or be killed sort of energy. You either are being sacrificed or you're benefiting off of a sacrifice. That's the energy of Libra before the Babylonian overlay. It's still there though. Names of the stars, Zubinel Ganubi. That is the southern claw. Zubinel Ganubi, the southern claw. Used to be Scorpio, but they did an interesting little overlay with Libra. And that's like, you know, it's like balance. 5, right? Oh wait, what is Libra? No, see, Libra's not 5, it's 7. So, you know, another thing about Mithras is Mithras is all about contracts, vows, oaths, agreements. That is what this particular deity represents. The 7th house, which is ruled by Libra, also represents contracts. Coincidence? I wonder. Because it's like you got these scales of justice of Libra, right? Air sign. But it didn't used to be air. It used to be water. It used to be known as Scorpio, the claws of the scorpion. Zubinel Ganubi and Zubinel Shamali. And you know what was so weird is I was going through this constant cycle in my mind around looking up Nubia and Mali just a few weeks ago. Like, why do I care so much about Nubia and Mali? And why is it connected? Why do I see the connection of the financial system with Nubia and Mali? What's up with that? Nubia and Mali. And, you know, Nubia was known for massive amounts of gold, massive amounts of wealth. You can find a portion of the Nubian pyramids on the dollar bill today. So Nubia, and then Mali, okay, Mali, that was the great kingdom of gold, right? You know, you had Mansa Musa, right? Like all the gold came from Mali, Nubia and Mali, Zubinagel, Zubinagel Ganubi and Zubinagel Shamali. But the claws were replaced with scales of balance, measuring what do we measure? We measure matter, we measure materials, we measure resources, we measure things that we can purchase. We purchase through measurement. Interesting. But it's still coming from below the waters. Okay? Where can we see these two stars in the Scorpion constellation or the Scorpio constellation the most? You would need to go to Antarctica. Antarctica is where you can see it the clearest. The southern, that's right around where that southern ocean is. Zubin el-Ganubi, Zubin el-Shamali. So what is this telling us? Well, maybe our economic system or the way we measure wealth, even though it seems to be cosmic order scales of balance, it's really this predatory claw that's just, you know, kill or be killed. Who's going to be the sacrifice? Someone has to. That might be a secret, though, that's held within the priesthood. That might be a secret of Olokun. Interesting. But, you know, to learn more, we got to pass and become fish. Undetectable. Okay? These are all mysteries that we can learn if we look a little closer. I'm not going to say LGBTQ because that's an overlay. I believe LGBTQ to be an overlay of something else that's happening. Okay? Now, what I will say is there is an interesting boundary magic, and I'm still learning about this, y'all. I'm just sensing into these energies. The reason why people on the 3D plane are so strict sometimes about the rights of people who are same gender loving is because whatever happens in one realm, there's an equal and opposite, or maybe not equal and opposite, but there is a distinct correlation to what happens in another realm. Okay, so for example, in 3D world, in the 3D, somebody who is transgender would constantly be under surveillance, constantly be worrying about boundaries and threshold and passing. Just even going to the grocery store, that would be a thing. Anything could set that off. Their life would have to be so planned to a very specific way in order to hold that balance and equilibrium. Okay? But in another realm, maybe because they've mastered that art of boundaries and passing, maybe they can much more easily do that in other realms outside of the 3D. Now, for a woman who is incarnated in the third dimension, who is a biological woman, usually does not have to think about passing. Usually their femininity is their femininity. But in another realm, you would be on that opposite end, and you would be working on making sure you have your archetypes and the way you're presenting so worked out that you could pass and become fish. So if something happens in one realm to reverse that, then something would happen in the opposite realm to reverse that as well. So there is an interesting connection that I'm still working on articulating and fully understanding related to the balances of power and positionality when one group in surface Earth gets more power or recognition, quote unquote, or more access. The way that this kind of energy of polarity happens in this universe is that would directly cause a certain shift in another realm. Okay, so that's why there's this tension related to gender and sexuality and stuff like that, because it does have consequences in other realms as well. So sometimes people who are fighting so hard against, like, it should be just men and women procreating together and da 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 da. Like they actually can tap into those energies, and they're gatekeeping their world, okay? Because they intuitively know that, you know, if the freedom changes, right, it's gonna have a shift in another realm. And I'm still learning about the quote unquote politics of what that is, but I am seeing that there is that tension there, okay? But when we step into the realm of Neptune, we are neither this nor that, okay? We are going to be asked to stretch ourselves to be more than what we thought we could be. And we can do that through the energies of Marduk, which you'll learn more about boundaries. You'll learn more about black and white, merging the opposites. You'll learn more about this art of passing, archetypes, theater, art, how you manipulate these certain tools in your world to create what it is you want to see and to have access to where you need to go. But if you're having an issue with LGBTQ, look deeper into that. It's probably not even of this realm, and you're moving into probably some under the sea type energies with that, okay? And it has to do with the priesthood. All right, let's see. What do we got? Hello for folks coming in. Thank y'all for listening to this interesting topic, you know? All right, Lulu. Hi, Lulu. Hey, Heather. They call it clocking when you're not able to pass and drag. Exactly, clocked. Saturnian magic. Yo, the queer community, to be queer in a polarized society, you need to know Saturn so well. Clocked. You get clocked otherwise. So they are having a Saturnian initiation as soon as they start forming gender, and they know they want to move to another gender. That is a whole initiation, y'all, that's happening. And they're being prepared to move into other realms. This is priestly stuff. We need to learn about that, or else you're going to be left at them gates. You ain't going to be able to pass. You're not going to be fish enough. Okay, so a lot of feminines, we need to move into our masculine more. And that doesn't mean because all of a sudden, what happens? If you move into your masculine, oh, you're gay, you like women now. It's like, no, it's not about that. It's about I'm what I need to be when I need to be it. Okay, and we'll explore more about that in the mysteries of Marduk. But yes, thank you, Lulu. That clocking, getting clocked, Saturn, you do not pass. You got clocked. You're still in this realm. If you're getting clocked, you ain't going nowhere. Initiated stuff. Okay. Okay. Angel 333 said, no disrespect, but if soulmate betrayed you, what are consequences? Okay. I get why you said that, because it's not really on topic. I don't believe in consequences like that. I believe in neutrality. At least in this stage of my journey, I believe in no baggage, no weight. So I don't believe in consequences like that. So I can't answer that question. Okay, Krishna says, Obatala, Kuan Yin, and, I don't know this one, Ardhanashvara are also deities that have both goddess and god forms. Yes, very true. Very true. Most Hindu goddesses have a masculine form for whom they are a Shakti or a power source for. Yes. And so if you're looking at things from 3D, I could see how you might see that as being disrespectful. Like, oh, well, maybe that's disrespectful to the feminine form, right? Because it's like, why not just have a woman goddess? Why is it a man that sometimes looks like a woman? So, like, why that? Like, it can feel like something from you is being taken. But the other way of seeing it is like, the more you can express yourself in different emanations, the more mystical, magical, goddess-like you can be. Okay. If you're too caught up in just being this one cardboard cutout, you're cutting yourself off from more magic and possibility. And this transcends the 3D of sex, partnership, who you choose to marry, who you choose to be with. This is not about that. This is the art and theater of the practice of becoming and being, and how this navigates you being able to pass through different realms. Okay. But this is why we got to take sex out of it and gender out of it. These are constructs that were imposed on our consciousness to keep us limited. So we need to work on unlearning these constructs, because it's literally keeping us in a state of stagnancy. Okay, and the more fluid we can be, what do they say? They call it gender fluidity. The more fluid we can be, the more we will be able to get the necessary knowledge, wisdom, and wish fulfillment that we seek. Okay, but it means being different things at different times and passing while we do it. Okay. All right, so that is where I'm going to end it, y'all. All right, thank y'all for hanging out with me during this process. For folks on Black Diamond, or no, I think I'm going to do it on Genetic Path Cutter. I want to have like a call. I think I want to do it for Friday the 13th. So I just need to organize that. But I wanted to go a little bit more into the degrees of power related to Marduk, and specifically talk about that darker aspect, that maybe will need to be alchemized in order to get to more of that empowerment information. So I'll be sharing more about that soon. Stay tuned for that. I've been getting a huge treasure trove of information from really listening to the mysteries of Marduk, and would like to share that specifically with folks who identify as feminine, to get you more into your fluidity. You will need to be fluid for where you're trying to go. So all these rigid thought forms that are keeping you polarized against groups is only going to stagnate you. And everybody else going to be flowing and swimming and fishing around you, being a fish. And you, who were fish to begin with, you're all of a sudden not fish. You see, that's the real problem. That's your issue. It has nothing to do with how other people choose to live their lives and express their sexuality. You are getting at a deeper ancestral hurt related to the priesthood. So alchemize that. Do so through becoming the priesthood. Become fish. So that's where I'm going to end it, y'all. Okay. Thank you, Chelsea. Hey, girl. Okay, bye, Notabot. You said the dragons in the underworld. Okay, sorry. Let me just make sure I get all this. Okay, Notabot, you said, for the fish, there is a dragon energy to it, because the trees and portals of the underworld tend to become neutral around water. Are the shackles akin to the root system? Man, you always be coming with it. Okay, you be adding that extra sauce, you know what I'm saying? So let's talk about it, because that was a download I just got as I was preparing for this. The root races. They talk about, the 4 root races, the 7 root races, and they want to give us so caught up in the root races. You're like, if you get too caught up in root races, you're caught up in the genetic engineering program that was overlaid onto this planet. You're rooted. That's not where our DNA started from. Our DNA started in the waters. It ain't started on no roots. The people who are the most connected to the mysteries, they stay connected to the waters. That's why royalty, they have blue blood, blue-blooded. We're going to decode more about what that truly means. So you're over here being a root race. That's your slave lineage. That's when you got the clink. Stay on land over there. You're rooted now. You are root race. That's what that is. So get all that stuff. Deprogram all this 12 tribes of Israel stuff. You got to become the priesthood to do that. You won't see it. You'll be so rooted in your root race. I'm yellow. I'm white. I'm red. I'm black. Nah. That ain't where it's at. Where's the blue, though? I don't see no blue in there like that. You got to get out of that root system. You got to be able to pass. And, going back to the mysteries of the queer community, isn't it a lot easier to get out of a root system if you're not procreating? Even if you're not allowed to be married. You can't be rooted. That might be, the curse that we think it is on, surface Earth could have a completely opposite polarity in another realm. could allow for more movement and fluidity and abundance, to not be rooted, to not be in this root system. So yes, that's a big part of it. Let me make sure. Oh, and then you said dragons. Look up Dagon, which I think there is a dragon connection, but look up the god Dagon. That's a big part of this whole energy. Okay, and I do think they're messing with the language. See, this is we want to take things so seriously, right? Because like you see stuff on the news, you see all this serious stuff going on. Like we're going to war, we're this is happening, that's happening, this emergency's happening, this scarcity's happening. But behind the scenes, there are people, or not people, there are forces orchestrating the strings, and they love to laugh and they love to play in your face. When you learn about some of these mysteries, they're not even serious, they're more funny. It's like, oh, that's an interesting riddle. Oh, that's an interesting little trick you did. That's what it is. It's like a whole bunch of smoke and mirrors, like that wizard shit, you know, that Wizard of Oz shit. So a lot of illusion, a lot of glamour, okay? These are a part of the mysteries too that you can find in more of the priesthood frequencies of the male gay community. If you look at the male gay community, not all, okay, but there is a frequency that you can tap into, and that is a priestly frequency, and the way that they're living life is very priestly. However you feel about it, but it's power. And one thing I'm learning from the exploration I'm doing with Marduk is let's learn about the degrees of power, because you can learn about it through being manipulated through it, you know, and having the blindfold on. Or you can initiate yourself into the fine nuances of power and how it works, okay? And you can see beneath the veils of illusion that particular way. Okay. You're welcome, Lulu. You're welcome, Sammy. Okay, you said yes, there's a lot of wars, arguments on original race people. Yep. The thing about it, though, when we first, let's stop thinking about what we've been taught. But what do we see a lot of times in fetuses? They look more aquatic, right? Like in order to even come into this earth, you need to be in water. Like everything's done through water a lot of times. You know, so anything outside of water or seems like it's disconnected from water could be more of the illusion than the water itself. So this root races thing, like it's hard to do the root races thing in water in the same way, you know? So yeah, the mysteries of the waters is that the water is the air is the water. A lot of the things that we think about as being above ground are submerged in water too. Yeah, interesting stuff. I always felt that we are beyond our incarceration physical race. Yes. You're welcome. Not a bot. You don't believe the news anymore. Yeah, or you know what, another thing that you can do? You can get some really interesting downloads, like watching stupid stuff. I've gotten some of the most like biggest downloads watching like a cartoon or like a little show that's supposed to not be serious. A lot of times they put the serious stuff in there. It's all opposite, you know, because it's like a big old joke, you know. That's a part of the whole power play. Is like, yeah, make it look serious, but beneath the surface, it's theater. Okay. You said, I always felt what is being in panic and fear going to do for us. War is a distraction and harvesting our fears and pinning us against each other. Yeah, and it's a part of the sexual misery program on this planet. You know, the way we know about sexual energy is usually through sex and war. And those are really potent ways of generating lots of energy. So keep poking at, you know, war and, you know, selling through sex, all that stuff so that you can harness that energy. But it's not actually about what's being generated through our bodies. There's an energetic force field that's happening. Okay. And people who make a habit of utilizing sex not to procreate are more in tune with those mysteries than people who have been trained to have sex through procreation. It actually, you're going to find you need to reclaim a lot of your consciousness through the act of sex. And what I mean, I don't mean like you have sex to reclaim your consciousness. I'm sure that's a way of doing it. I don't know. But what I've been tuning into is the farming of the human population on this planet, and the creation of the root system, the family structure through this practice of farming humans has greatly diminished our consciousness. And, you know, another thing is like you can be a very sexual person and not have sex. You could just be channeling that information in other ways. People and priesthoods, they do it in different ways. It's important to know about it so you can have some agency, and you can see things happening, and that's how you can influence the way your world plays out, as if you can see the hidden stuff that's going on to choose another course. But yeah, you would need to kind of learn about these mysteries of sex. So there might be a time where you reclaim your sexual energy through celibacy. That doesn't mean you're not sexual. It just means you're channeling your energy in a different way. And that doesn't mean that sex can't be healing. I'm sure it can be. It's just, you know, what consciousness are you having it at? Are you having it at the consciousness of genetic engineering? And this is what I'm supposed to do because I'm a woman, and here's this guy who's kind of hot, and, you know, we're dating, so I guess I should. Or is it, what consciousness are you having it through? You know, a lot of sex has become a thing of, well, I'm just going to have it because I should, you know. How many times has that been something that's been portrayed in marriage, right? You got to keep your husband happy. So, you know, you might not want to have sex, but hey, throw him a bone. We'll have some sex today, you know. That lowers that drains you. You know, though that sex is going into certain grid systems. So that energy is not yours anymore, and you're consenting to having it like circulated and stuff. So there might be a part of your journey of reclaiming your sexual energy, and you don't have sex. That doesn't make you any less sexual. It's just you're seeing the dynamics of where your energy has gone, and you're rerouting it. Men will need to do this as well. So this is how we get into the energies of the priesthood. Like, try living like a priest for a little bit. What's that? And I'm not recommending living like a priest in all ways, but I am saying, like, at some point you need to look at whatever is the most oppressing you in your life, and you need to look at the world through their eyes to deeply understand what you need to integrate. Okay, so I understand this is a weird dance. We're talking about very predatory energies that have been moving through the planet, and we haven't understood it. We've been thinking that everything is balanced, like those scales of Libra, and that everything is just law and order. But that was an overlay. Justice itself is an overlay, because underneath those scales of Libra, there's some kind of force under the sea that's a little bit more ruthless about things. And something about that generates resources for us. Kind of goes into that energy of social Darwinism. You know, look into social Darwinism. They were onto something with that, okay? A lot of those dudes were initiated into these energies of Mithras as well, okay? So a lot of the stuff you can find from like rational thought and everything else, you can find it from those same sorts of priesthoods and stuff. So maybe things aren't as balanced as we thought. You know, how would our perspective of things change if we knew that this was a predator or prey environment that we're in? You know, we intuitively know that, but everything in the messaging says, oh, justice and balance and order, okay? But if you realize that you were already marked for like a Hunger Games scenario on this game board, you know, and you were either going to be benefiting from those scorpionic claws or being a sacrifice, how would that shift your energy? You know, how would that shift the way you move? So these are just some things to think about. A little uncomfortable sometimes. Marduk makes you uncomfortable. It gets at all those little awkward things that have bothered you for different reasons, but you weren't sure why, because you also didn't know how you could express it because you didn't want to be seen too controversial or something like that. That's all Marduk. Now we're getting into the realms of power and the way power is expressed in ways that are unspoken and the ways that are wrapped up in vows and agreements. So we'll need to go into those frequencies to retrieve, okay? Otherwise, we'll just be ran by that same energy time and time again. Okay, I always felt, oh wait, no, yes, you love cartoons. Yeah. Cartoons, they be having codes in them. Can I ask, how did you get out of the sacrifice label on you? You know, if you see things as a theater or a game, everything's a mask that you can put on. You get to a point, if you've worn the mask of being the sacrifice enough and you're working on neutrality, there's a way to access another polarity where, you know, you might need to retrieve your power from certain predatory energies, which means you would need to learn the realm of being a predator. Ooh, no one's supposed to be a predator, right? We're supposed to all be equal and balanced. Well, if that could be a potentiality, but first you need to have an interesting role reversal that goes on. But it also has a lot to do with becoming fish. You have to become fish. And I'll be explaining more about that. I'm in that process, like literally right now. That's what that's my assignment currently, is like, I'm going to go through this process and document it and talk about it. Okay. And for people who are going through this process and who find relevancy in this, there are plenty of tools to support you so you can see into my world, see how I'm perceiving things, see what's been shown to me with these mysteries. You know, this is it. Like, you know, a lot of people go through these processes and they're, shh, 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 I can't say this, I can't say that. You know, I can't break the vow. I don't have vows. There's no vows. I don't have any vows related to holding on to these mysteries. And the ones that I did have, we're not doing that anymore. So the alchemy is, you know, I see fairness. The closest I can get to fairness with this is share the information. That being said, I'm not going to be I mean, there is an extremely predatory nature to the way this society moves. And I think the more we can just get it out on the table, take out all the values and all of the mission statements that we've been force fed since we were children. We just take that out of there and just get the facts as they are. Okay. And then move from there. But this is why I am going really deep with Marduk and all the degrees of power. Okay. You gotta dance with the devil. Okay. It's a requirement, by the way. You can't get out of it. Okay. I'm sorry. I tried. No, have to. I tried to bypass. And then that Marduk energy was like, oh no. They saw it on Black Diamond. This all came out when I was opening a particular portal on Black Diamond. And it was like, you're not passing no gates, no boundary lines until you deal with me and retrieve all energies from this archetype. And I'm like, all right, let's go, Marduk. So I'm on a Marduk ride right now. And it's fascinating. So, and it's getting me to talk about topics like this. So I'll be sharing more about that journey. Also, if you want to navigate the waters, you need to you need to go into the frequencies of Marduk, which means you need to become the priesthood. Otherwise, you can do the waters, but you'll be a tool. You'll be an instrument in the waters. You won't have that agency that you want. Okay. So yeah, you know, it's an evolving artwork, not a bot. Okay. And nothing's ever finished. But there's a power in reversal and neutrality. You know, don't try to show or prove anything to anybody. Just work on becoming neutral. And it's a lot more easier to pass or to duck or to reverse or to manipulate when you're neutral. You know, the world's your oyster after that. So yeah, that's where we're going to stop it for today, y'all. Mysteries of passing, the art of passing. Become a fish, become fish. Study the energies of the LGBTQ or not LGBTQ. That's the overlay. Study the energies of the queer community, specifically gay men, and how they live and how they organize their lives and how they accumulate power. You will find mysteries of the priesthood in that. Okay. Lots of good stuff, lots of Saturnian boundary magic with the art of passing and becoming fish. All right, y'all. Talk to you later. Bye.